Hello and welcome to the Wisdom Hunters podcast. My name is Tripp. I'm the content director here at Wisdom Hunters. I'm here with Boyd Bailey, president of Wisdom Hunters. And Boyd, today is our last conversation on the themes in your new book, Wisdom for Living.
Yes, really excited about this book, Tripp, and it feels great. You can almost pet it.
It's great in the hand. You can pet it. Yeah, you can read it as well if you want. I really would encourage you, if you're listening, to make sure you catch up on the first four principles, first four themes that we looked at if you haven't done so, because they really are integrated. One of the thoughts I've had as we've had these conversations, Boyd, is just the ways in which these are not distinct themes, but each one of them relates to one another. And wisdom is really found when we combine all five of these into a holistic way of living, a way of life. That is a picture of wise living. And so maybe today we will wrap up and kind of complete that circle of wise living with our fifth theme, which you call vocational wisdom. And I'm mindful, some of our listeners may not even be familiar with that word or know quite what we mean when we say vocational or vocation. And so let's begin and try and define that a bit. What do you mean when you say vocational wisdom?
Yeah, I know for me, maybe like some of our listeners, started working at a young age, which is great, kept me out of trouble in a lot of ways. Worked hard, but I found myself being driven then, not just working hard, but being driven for work to just consume my life.
Yeah.
And I had to learn somewhere along the way, especially when I became married, that, there had to be a balance with this. And why am I working? It was the question I had to ask myself. And so as a Christian, a new believer, when I read that verse that Paul wrote about do your work as unto the Lord.
Right.
That was a game changer for me. It's like, wow, regardless of, like in graduate school, I was mowing grass or washing trucks or doing all this, heavy lifting in my work. Yes, I was providing for my family, but even there was a bigger purpose there. And the bigger person for my job or my career or my vocation is my boss is Jesus. And that put a whole different perspective on it, where when I had a bad day with a teammate, or I have a bad day I was misunderstood by my supervisor, I could go back and get on my knees and just say, Lord, help my heart here, because really, ultimately, I'm working for you. And so I think that's the heart of the wisdom in our vocation, in our jobs, our career is, who are we working for?
Yeah.
Or why are we working? And if I keep it as a child of God, laboring in God's kingdom, then it's a much more freeing, purposeful way to live.
Yeah. I think that question you just asked, why am I working? It's a really important question everyone needs to ask. And as a Christian, to realize that all the work that we do, regardless of what you do, can be offered as a gift to the Lord. And I think, especially in church circles, Boyd, you and I both have a history of working in ordained Christian ministry. And sometimes when we talk about vocation in the church, our imaginations really are limited on those people we would in the church identify as ministers, those set apart, sometimes people call them professional Christians,
yes.
That sort of thing. And there is something to a vocation in Christian ministry that's to be celebrated. You see it throughout the Bible. But also, we don't want to minimize our imagination or limit our imagination when it comes to vocation, to realize every Christian has a vocation and really has a Christian vocation. And so if you work in medicine or finance or tech, what does it mean? Why does it matter that you have a vision of vocation as wisdom and a part of your calling as a Christian?
Yeah, I like how Mother Teresa had a way of just kind of saying it.
Yeah.
And
when in doubt, go to Mother Teresa. You could do a lot worse, I think. Yeah.
Mother Teresa told a young leader one day, your vocation is to love people. And I thought, that pretty much sums it up. And then she actually said it like this: your vocation is to love God and to love people.
Yeah.
Is how she said it. And Tripp, I think it's important that we remember the essence of why we're doing what we're doing. When we change jobs as Christians, we really all have the same one-sentence job description, though technically we do different things and we have all different expertises and experiences. We're taking our expertise and our experience as followers of Jesus, and we're loving people. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so I have to remind myself there's a calling here. God has called us to ministry, to serve. Jesus came not to be served, but to serve. And so, as believers, I think we have to be wise and careful as we get into our work culture, that hopefully we're influencing the culture that we're in to be one of working for a bigger purpose, not for ourselves. And where I think when people feel like they're truly loved in the workplace and that they feel like we can be trusted, there's an integrity there where they say, wow, I trust you. You do what you say. You're honest. You're living not just for what you can gain, but how you can serve and help me. And so I think that's what's important is, as you said, there's this bigger calling here of ministry, not just the professional ministers, but we're all ministers in God's kingdom.
So here's something I'm mindful of that comes to mind. You give Mother Teresa as an example. It's not hard for us and for our listeners to see the way in which her life is a pure example of love of God, of seeing a vocation of love, we could call it. Sometimes, though, that may feel so inspiring that it's inaccessible because you and I are not Mother Teresa. I'm curious, do you have other examples maybe that come to mind of someone whose life looks quite different than Mother Teresa, but you would say that is still a beautiful example of a vocation of love offered to God?
Yeah, an example comes to mind. A friend of mine is expecting a child at work. And HR and her supervisor said, you are so valuable to this organization. We want you to, number one, take care of yourself, and number two, take care of your pregnancy and your child. They literally allowed her to have this flexibility to do some work from home, to delegate to other team members, to have what she needed to nurture that child in a way that she didn't feel stressed and overwhelmed, and then gave her a very generous leave of absence, paid leave of absence after having the child. Well, somebody might say, well, that's what someone should do legally, or that, I guess there's laws in different states on leave of absence for maternity. But to me, Tripp, that illustrated loving somebody in the work environment in a way that they didn't necessarily have to. And I think those are the examples of, how can I defer to you to what you need so that I can love you in a way that's meaningful to you?
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think sometimes for us, it's great to have the example of the saints, but also great to have the example of the people we know.
Well, I'll give you another example. A friend that was a board chair of ours for 6 years in a former nonprofit I served, he was an IBM executive.
Okay.
And, back in the day, that was kind of the place you would go to learn business and learn how to sell. And he was on the fast track. Well, he was at a season of life that he had 3 teenagers. And IBM wanted to, relocate him. And he was like, no, I really want to stay with my family. So long story short, he turned down the promotion. To begin with, his supervisors didn't quite understand that. But over time, there was this respect that bubbled up, and especially when they saw his adult children and the values and the priorities and the good choices and the wisdom that they had. And so then he was back in contention for another promotion, but now the season was right, and he could follow that and do it. And so as I've talked to our 4 sons-in-laws, you being one of them, I think it's a good conversation as we talk about ambition. How can I also be ambitious for my family? Not just a selfless ambition at work, but how can I be ambitious for my family in a way that they don't just get the leftovers emotionally after the hard day at work, but they actually get the first fruits of my emotions and my concerns and my presence. And so it's all about perspective. It's all about seeing work as a calling from God to accomplish His purposes and not to have to compromise our relationships in the process.
Yeah, I love that idea. Just what you said, work is a calling from God. And I think if you identify as a Christian, that identity is in and of itself a calling. It's an invitation into a vocation. You look at baptism. The baptism of Jesus was his entry into mission, his entry into a vocation and a calling. And I think it's the same for you and me, that if you are baptized, you're given a mission, you're given a purpose that transcends where your paycheck comes from.
Well,
It's bigger than direct deposit.
Well, exactly, Tripp. And again, here's where the love theme comes back. Work is our platform to love people.
Yeah, that's right.
And in the process, get things done too.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, it's about time to wrap this conversation up. Any final thoughts on how we do this well vocationally? Since this is our last one, any final parting words in this whole series on Wisdom for Living, how we continue to live wisely?
Yeah, I would just say do not be afraid of integrating your faith in your career and in your work.
Yeah.
When you do your work with excellence, people will want to know, why do you do this? And let's not be shy about it. The reason I do this is I actually work for a bigger purpose. I actually work for a bigger boss.
That's right.
Something bigger than this motivates me. And I think through that, then, our work actually becomes an apologetic. It becomes the gospel for people that need Jesus.
It's so good. So helpful. Well, boy, thank you so much.
You're
This has
welcome.
been a gift to me, to our listeners. I'm certain of that. Thank you for joining us. If you do not yet have it, pick up Wisdom for Living. It's a great way to live into all 5 of these themes. And so there's principles on each one of them. You can journey with us through this book, but more importantly, journey with us through wise living by pursuing the Lord every day of your life. It's what it means to be a Christian, to be a wisdom hunter, and it's a joy to do that with each of you. So God bless you, and thanks for joining us.